The Salt Lake City airport buzzed with the pulse of morning departures, jet engines roaring like a distant thunderstorm. Inside the sleek offices of Pinnacle Airways, Jack Harper, 52, stood in a corner office, his captain's uniform crisp despite the weight of the moment. For 17 years, he'd been a senior captain and chief flight instructor, his name synonymous with Pinnacle's flawless safety record and punctual flights. He'd trained every captain who'd earned their wings in the last decade, shaping a team that made Pinnacle the go-to airline for executives and families alike. But now, as he faced Ethan Caldwell, the new operations manager, Jack's world was unraveling. "Your position has been eliminated due to restructuring," Ethan said, his eyes glued to a spreadsheet on his monitor, avoiding Jack's gaze. At 38, Ethan was a corporate climber, his tailored suit and slick haircut screaming ambition. His fingers tapped impatiently on the desk, as if Jack's 17 years of service were just another line item to check off. "Your compensation doesn't align with our growth strategy. The severance details are in here." He slid a manila envelope across the polished surface, finally glancing up, his expression blank. Jack took the envelope, his hand steady from years of guiding planes through turbulence. Through the office window, a Pinnacle Airbus A320 taxied toward the runway, its silver fuselage catching the dawn light. Flight 1827 to Seattle, he thought, picturing Sarah Mitchell in the captain's seat. He'd signed off on her certification 2 years ago, watched her grow from a nervous first officer to a confident leader. "Anything else?" Jack asked, his voice calm, betraying none of the storm inside. Ethan shook his head, already turning back to his screen. "HR's waiting downstairs for exit procedures." Jack stood, adjusting his jacket, the habit from his Air Force days, and headed for the door. Ethan's voice stopped him. "Captain Harper? We'll need your uniform returned before you leave." Jack nodded without looking back, stepping into the hallway where Megan from HR stood, clipboard in hand, her smile tight and professional. As they walked to the elevator, Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Ryan Kessler, one of his first officers. "Is it true?" Word spread fast in an airline. Jack pocketed the phone, following Megan to a sterile processing room where he'd surrender his badge, keys, and the uniform that had defined him for nearly 2 decades. In the locker room, he changed into jeans and a polo, folding his uniform with the precision of a military drill. His captain's hat sat atop the pile, its gold braid glinting. Inside his locker, a faded photo caught his eye. His first Pinnacle crew, grinning beside a 737. Most were captains now, soaring across the country, unaware their mentor had just been grounded. Jack's love for flying began at 18, fueled by late-night shifts at a small airfield in Boise, pumping gas to pay for lessons. By 24, he had his commercial license, flying cargo routes across the Rockies. The Air Force followed 10 years of service, from training missions to high-stakes ops in desert skies. At 35, Pinnacle Airways recruited him, drawn by his military precision and hunger to build something great. The airline was a rising star then, led by founder William Grayson, who'd shaken Jack's hand and said, "Make me the best damn flight crew in the business." Jack delivered, crafting a training program that became the industry's gold standard. Every new pilot, from green flight school grads to grizzled military transfers, passed through his simulator sessions, mastering emergency procedures and precision landings. Pinnacle's reputation for safety and excellence was his legacy, built on sweat and discipline. But 3 years ago, William retired, handing the reins to his daughter, Lauren Grayson, a 34-year-old MBA with a vision for efficiency. Consultants swarmed, wielding charts and buzzwords like optimization. The changes crept in slowly: fewer training hours, tighter turnaround times, maintenance deferred to save costs. Ethan Caldwell arrived 6 months ago, a spreadsheet warrior with no aviation experience but a mandate to slash expenses. Jack saw the red flags: veteran pilots replaced by cheaper contractors, simulator time cut, and safety concerns dismissed as overcaution. At a management meeting last month, he'd warned about the risks of rushed pre-flight checks. Ethan's response was a thin smile and a quip: "We're streamlining to meet industry benchmarks, Jack." The room had gone quiet, but no one backed him up. The severance meeting was a blur. Megan handed him forms, her voice soft but mechanical. "Sign here, and we'll process your final paycheck. Jack complied, his mind elsewhere, on the pilots he'd trained, the 6 instructors he supervised, the passengers who trusted Pinnacle's wings. As he left HR, his phone buzzed again. A text from Emily Vaughn, his chief instructor. Emergency meeting, pilot's lounge. Now, Jack should have gone home, taken the severance, and moved on. But something pulled him back. A loyalty deeper than any contract. He rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. The lounge was a powder keg. 10 pilots waited. Ryan Kessler, Emily Vaughn, and 8 others, all captains Jack had mentored. Their faces were a mix of fury and disbelief. "Is it true?" Ryan asked, his voice tight. Jack nodded, effective immediately. "Restructuring," they said, "just business." Emily scoffed, her arms crossed. "Business? You've been here since Pinnacle was flying prop planes. You built this airline's soul." "What's the plan, Jack?" asked Michael Torres, a captain who'd been Jack's first officer for 4 years. His eyes burned with the same defiance Jack had seen in simulator crashes when pilots fought to save their plane. "No plan," Jack said, his voice steady. "I'm out. You've got flights to prep." Ryan paced, his boots scuffing the floor. "They can't do this. You're the backbone of our training. Half of us wouldn't be here without you." "Don't tank your careers over this," Jack said, raising a hand. "That's not what I want." But as he turned to leave, his phone rang. William Grayson's name flashed on the screen. Jack stepped into the hallway, answering. "Jack, I just heard," William growled, his voice thick with anger. "Lauren told me it was a mutual retirement. That true?" "Not quite," Jack said, glancing through the lounge's glass wall. More pilots were arriving, their voices rising. "This isn't my airline anymore," Williams said, his tone bitter. "Not if they treat you like this. I've got a friend, Marcus Lee, at Horizon Elite. They're expanding, need someone to revamp their training. You interested?" Horizon Elite was a rising star in luxury and corporate charters, known for quality and deep pockets. "Maybe," Jack said, "but I need a minute to breathe." "Take the weekend," William urged. "I'll set up a meeting for Monday." As Jack hung up, he saw Ethan Caldwell striding toward the lounge, his face red with irritation. Inside, the crowd had grown. Nearly 20 pilots now, all in uniform, their voices a low roar. Jack's heart raced. For 17 years, he'd given Pinnacle everything. Perfect records, late-night training sessions. He'd built their safety protocols, mentored dozens. Made Pinnacle a name passengers trusted. And they'd discarded him in 3 minutes, demanding his uniform like a trophy. Something snapped. Jack pushed back into the lounge just as Ethan burst through the opposite door. "Don't you all have flights to prep?" Ethan snapped, his eyes scanning the room. No one moved. 20 pairs of eyes turned to Jack, waiting. Jack took a breath, his voice low but firm. "Actually, we need to discuss crew safety concerns." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Captain Harper is no longer employed here. Safety issues go through me." "Through you?" Emily shot back, her voice sharp. "The guy who cut our simulator time by 1/3? The one pushing us to skip pre-flight checks?" "This is about safety, not me," Jack said, stepping forward. "These pilots have legitimate concerns, and federal regulations give them the right to raise them." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You're disrupting operations, Harper. Step out, or I'll have security escort you." Jack met his gaze, unyielding. "I'm supporting my crew's professional obligations. That's my duty, employed or not." The room held its breath, the tension thick enough to choke on. Ethan pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Lauren." As he stepped aside, Emily leaned close to Jack. "What's the play here?" "No play," Jack said, his voice soft but resolute, "just making sure they're heard." But something was stirring, a spark of defiance, a crew united by the man who'd taught them to fly. Jack's phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "More pilots incoming. We're with you." Outside, the tarmac gleamed, planes waiting for captains who weren't moving. Jack Harper, grounded but unbroken, stood at the heart of a rebellion he hadn't planned, but couldn't walk away from. The pilot's lounge at Pinnacle Airways was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the weight of betrayal and defiance. Jack Harper stood at the heart of it, his calm exterior masking a storm of rage and resolve. Moments ago, Ethan Caldwell, the operations manager who'd fired him after 17 years, had stormed out, threatening to call Lauren Grayson, Pinnacle's CEO. 20 pilots, captains, and first officers Jack had trained stood, united, their eyes locked on him, waiting for a signal. They'd refused to prep their flights, citing safety concerns that Ethan had dismissed as irrelevant. Jack's phone buzzed relentlessly with texts from more pilots joining the fray, a rebellion sparked by his unceremonious dismissal. He'd told them to stand down, to protect their careers, but the spark he'd ignited was now a wildfire. Outside, the Salt Lake City tarmac gleamed, planes grounded as the crew drew a line in the sand. Jack Harper, stripped of his uniform but not his duty, was no longer just a fired captain. He was the voice of a crew fighting for the soul of their airline. The lounge door swung open, and Ethan returned, flanked by Lauren Grayson, her tailored blazer a stark contrast to the pilots' uniforms. At 34, she carried the weight of her father's legacy, but none of his warmth. Her eyes swept the room, landing on Jack with a mix of irritation and unease. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "You're all scheduled to fly. Return to your duties now or face termination." No one moved. Emily Vaughn, the chief flight instructor, stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "We're not flying until our safety concerns are addressed. Federal aviation regulations back us up." She glanced at Jack, who nodded, his presence a quiet anchor. Lauren's jaw tightened. "Captain Harper is no longer employed here. He has no authority in this discussion." "He's got more authority than you'll ever understand," Ryan Kessler shot back, his pacing stopped, his fists clenched. "He trained every captain in this room. He's the reason passengers trust us." Jack raised a hand, his voice steady. "This isn't about me. It's about rushed turnarounds, cut training hours, and maintenance issues being swept under the rug. These pilots have a right to refuse unsafe conditions." Ethan scoffed, stepping closer to Jack. "You're orchestrating this, Harper. Disrupting operations to spite us. Security's on their way." Before Jack could respond, Emily pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "You want to talk disruption? Look at this." She turned the screen to the room, revealing a series of maintenance reports for Pinnacle's fleet. The pilots crowded around, their faces darkening. "These are initial and final reports," Emily said, her voice trembling with fury. "Critical issues, hydraulic leaks, engine anomalies downgraded to advisory, service intervals stretched beyond manufacturer specs. This started 4 months ago, right after your new maintenance software, Ethan." The room erupted in murmurs, pilots exchanging horrified glances. Jack leaned in, his heart sinking as he scrolled through the files. "This is fraud," he said, his voice low but lethal. "These reports go to the FAA. You're endangering passengers." Lauren's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "That's baseless. You have no proof." "We have both versions," Emily countered, her eyes blazing. "Every alteration, time-stamped. This isn't cost-cutting. It's criminal." Ethan's smugness faltered, his eyes darting to Lauren. "This is off-topic. Submit your concerns in writing and we'll review them. Flights leave now." "I'm not flying," Ryan said, crossing his arms. "Flight 1827 to Seattle? Canceled. Safety concerns." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Pilots naming their routes, refusing to budge. Lauren's voice rose, sharp with desperation. "This is insubordination. You'll all be fired. Then explain to the FAA why your entire flight crew walked," Michael Torres said, his voice calm but unyielding, "and why your maintenance records are a lie." As security guards entered, Jack saw Ryan slip Emily's laptop into his flight bag, the evidence safe. Lauren's eyes met Jack's, a flicker of fear beneath her composure. "You're making a mistake, Harper," she said quietly. "We could have made this easy." "It's about trust," Jack replied, his voice breaking with the weight of 17 years. "You broke it." The guards escorted him to the parking lot, their grips firm but unnecessary, Jack walked with the dignity of a man who'd never compromised. His phone buzzed with texts. Flight 2241 to Denver, canceled. Phoenix route grounded. Pinnacle's schedule was unraveling. Pilots refusing to fly, citing safety. Not a strike. Illegal, without union protocols. But a collective stand. Each decision, a brick in the wall Jack had unknowingly built. In his car, Jack's hands trembled. Not from fear, but from the weight of what he'd unleashed. He called William Grayson, his voice raw. "It's worse than we thought, William. They're falsifying maintenance records. The pilots have proof, but Lauren's threatening to fire them all." William's breath hissed through the phone. "That explains their profit spikes, cutting corners on maintenance. Damn it, Jack, this isn't my airline anymore." A pause. "Stay clear of the terminal. I'm making calls." Jack drove to his empty house, the silence heavy after years of jet noise. Divorced 4 years, his son at college in Colorado, he was alone with his thoughts. His phone lit up with updates. Chicago flight canceled, mechanical issue, Miami route down, crew unavailable. By evening, Pinnacle's website showed over 50 cancellations, passengers stranded, the airline bleeding. Jack's heart ached, not for the company, but for the passengers who trusted Pinnacle, the families boarding planes that might not be safe. He thought of the mother buckling her toddler into a seat, the businessman heading to a funeral, all unaware of the lies in the maintenance logs. He'd fought for them, and now his crew was carrying the torch. A call came from an unknown number. "Captain Harper, this is Karen Walsh, FAA Safety Inspector," a woman said, her tone urgent. "We've received reports of falsified maintenance records at Pinnacle. Can you connect us with Emily Vaughn?" "She's your primary source," Jack said, his voice steady despite the tears welling. "She's got the evidence. I'll give you her number." "We'd also like a statement from you," Karen said. "Are you willing?" "Name the time," Jack said, his resolve ironclad. He hung up, his chest tight with grief and pride. The FAA was moving, and Pinnacle was crumbling. But the cost was staggering, his crew risking their careers, passengers caught in the chaos, and Jack, a man who'd given everything, now a pariah in the airline he'd built. The next morning, Jack arrived at Horizon Elite's headquarters, a gleaming tower in Salt Lake's business district. Marcus Lee, the CEO, met him in the lobby, his handshake firm, his eyes sharp with respect. At 50, Marcus was a former pilot turned visionary, building Horizon into a premium charter powerhouse. "Jack, Williams spoke highly of you," he said, leading him to a conference room. "Pinnacle's in free fall. The FAA launched an investigation last night. Their stocks tanked." Jack nodded, unsurprised. They brought it on themselves. Marcus slid a folder across the table. An employment contract, the title, Director of Flight Operations, bolded. "We're expanding, Jack. I want you to lead our training and operations. Full autonomy, safety first, build it your way." The salary was double Pinnacle's, with stock options and a signing bonus. "And we'll take any Pinnacle pilots you trust. How many can you bring?" Jack thought of the lounge, the faces of his crew, Emily, Ryan, Michael, and dozens more. "At least 30, he said. "The best in the business." Marcus grinned. "Perfect. We're ready to steal Pinnacle's crown." He paused, his tone softening. "But don't sign anything from Pinnacle. No severance, no non-competes. They'll try to trap you." Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "FAA's here, all flights grounded." He showed Marcus, who whistled. "Timing's everything, Jack. They fired the wrong man." "I'm in," Jack said, shaking Marcus's hand, his heart pounding with purpose. But as he left, a news alert flashed. Pinnacle Airways grounds fleet amid FAA probe. Jack's tears fell now, not for himself, but for the passengers, the pilots, the trust he'd fought to protect. Pinnacle was collapsing, and his crew was paying the price. Yet in their stand, in the evidence they'd saved, Jack saw a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild, to fly again, to make the skies safe. The battle was just beginning, and Jack Harper, grounded but unbroken, was ready to soar. The Salt Lake City skyline glittered against the twilight, but Jack Harper's heart was heavy with the wreckage of Pinnacle Airways. The FAA's investigation had gutted the airline, grounding its fleet and exposing a web of falsified maintenance records that endangered countless lives. Over 340 flights canceled in 3 weeks, a 46% stock plunge, and the forced resignations of CEO Lauren Grayson and operations manager Ethan Caldwell marked Pinnacle's collapse, a fall Jack had unwittingly triggered. His defiance in the pilot's lounge, alongside Emily Vaughn's damning evidence, had sparked a rebellion that saved passengers but cost his crew their jobs and the airline its soul. Now, as Jack stood in Horizon Elite's gleaming headquarters, a contract for Director of Flight Operations in hand, he felt no triumph, only a burning resolve to rebuild what Pinnacle had destroyed. The skies were his home, and he'd make them safe again, no matter the cost. The fallout from Pinnacle was catastrophic. News anchors dissected the scandal. Pinnacle Airways faces FAA wrath over fraudulent records. Passengers shared horror stories of canceled flights, stranded families, and lost trust. Social media burned with outrage. Parents who'd flown with infants on planes with unchecked engines, veterans who'd trusted Pinnacle for medical trips, all betrayed by a company that put profits over lives. Jack's name stayed out of the headlines, but whispers of a whistleblower captain spread. A hero who'd stood against greed. His phone buzzed with messages from pilots. "You saved us, Jack. They can't break what you built." But each word cut deeper, reminding him of the crew, now jobless, blacklisted, or scattered. He thought of the passengers, their faces haunting him, a child clutching a teddy bear, a widow boarding for a funeral, people he'd sworn to protect. Tears fell as he sat alone, the weight of their trust crushing him. Pinnacle's betrayal wasn't just corporate, it was personal. Ethan's cold dismissal, Lauren's threats, the security guards escorting him out like a criminal, they'd stripped him of 17 years of loyalty in minutes. Jack's sacrifices, his marriage, his nights training pilots, his relentless pursuit of safety, meant nothing to them. Worse, they'd endangered lives, falsifying records to mask critical failures. Jack's rage boiled, not for himself, but for the passengers who'd never know how close they'd come to disaster. He thought of the 1988 Aloha Airlines incident where a maintenance lapse nearly down to 737. He'd vowed never to let that happen on his watch, and Pinnacle had made him a liar. The call from William Grayson had been a lifeline. "Jack, you need to meet Marcus Lee at Horizon Elite," he'd urged. "They're hungry for your expertise." Jack arrived at Horizon's headquarters the next day, still raw from Pinnacle's collapse. Marcus, a 50-year-old ex-pilot with a steely gaze, offered more than a job, a mission. "Build our flight operations and training program," he said, sliding a contract across the table. "We'll control, safety first. And bring your pilots. We'll take as many as you trust." Jack named 30 Emily, Ryan, Michael, and more, his loyal crew who'd risked everything. Marcus's grin was fierce. "We're going to bury Pinnacle's legacy and build something better." Jack signed, his heart pounding with purpose. But as he left, a voicemail from an unknown number chilled him. "Harper, you'll pay for this," a voice hissed, likely a Pinnacle lackey. "We'll sue you into the ground." The threat was empty, Jack's evidence was ironclad, but it underscored the cost of his fight. Sleepless nights followed, haunted by visions of planes falling, passengers screaming, his crew's faces pleading for help. His son Ethan called from college, his voice trembling. "Dad, you're all over the news. Are you okay?" Jack lied, saying he was fine, but the truth was he was breaking, torn between pride in his stand and guilt for the chaos it unleashed. 3 weeks later, Jack stood in Horizon Elite's new training center, a state-of-the-art marvel he'd designed. 6 flight simulators hummed, their screens glowing with virtual skies. Emergency training gear, smoke chambers, ditching pools stood ready to forge the safest pilots in the industry. Jack had full autonomy, and he'd poured his soul into every detail. Transparent maintenance logs, extended simulator hours, and a culture where any pilot could flag a concern without fear. The doors opened, and Emily Vaughn led the way, followed by Ryan, Michael, and 27 other Pinnacle veterans, their flight bags slung over shoulders, their eyes alight with hope. "Welcome to Horizon," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily grinned. "Hell of a setup, Captain." The pilots explored, their laughter echoing, a sound Jack hadn't heard since Pinnacle's fall. Marcus joined him, surveying the scene. 30 pilots in one day, he said. "That's a coup." Jack nodded, his throat tight. "Their family, the best there is." His phone rang. "William Grayson, turn on the news," he said, urgency in his voice. Jack activated the center's briefing screen, and the room fell silent as a business channel blared. Pinnacle Airways stock crashes, 46%, amid FAA probe. The ticker noted, trading halted, Lauren and Ethan gone, and 340 flights canceled. The anchor's voice was grim. Pinnacle's reliance on leased aircraft and crews at exorbitant rates has crippled operations, with lawsuits mounting. Jack's eyes burned, tears slipping free. His crew had paid dearly, jobs lost, reputations tarnished, but they'd saved lives. Passengers would never know how close they'd come to disaster, but Jack did, and it broke him. Emily squeezed his shoulder. "We did this together, Jack. For them." He nodded, unable to speak, thinking of the passengers, the trust he'd fought to restore. Horizon Elite soared, adding 12 premium routes and stealing Pinnacle's high-end market. Jack's training program became the industry's benchmark, praised by regulators and clients alike. Emails poured in from strangers, passengers, pilots, even FAA inspectors thanking him for his courage. One, from a mother whose son flew Pinnacle weekly, read, "You kept him safe. God bless you." Jack wept, the weight of her words a balm and a burden. 6 months later, Jack stood on Horizon's tarmac, watching a sleek Boeing 787 Dreamliner land, its reverse thrusters roaring with precision. Emily Vaughn was at the controls, her landing flawless, as Jack had taught her. Horizon was thriving, its reputation for safety and luxury unmatched. William Grayson joined him, his face lined but proud. "Pinnacle's board offered me the CEO job," he said. "They're begging for you, too. New chairman's coming to plead." Jack watched Emily disembark, waving from the terminal. "I'm where I belong," he said, his voice steady. He'd negotiated to fly regular charters, including a Tokyo run next week, because the cockpit was his heart, no matter his title. Pinnacle's envoy could beg, but Jack was done with their broken promises. The sun glinted off the Dreamliner's wings, a mirror of that morning in Ethan's office, when Jack had watched a plane taxi and lost everything. Now, he'd built something greater, a legacy of trust, a family of pilots, a shield for passengers. But as he turned to leave, a news alert flashed. Orion Airways under FAA scrutiny for maintenance lapses. The report cited a whistleblower inspired by Pinnacle's fall, naming Jack as the spark. His tears fell again, rage and hope colliding. Another airline, another fight, another chance to save lives, or lose himself. The skies called, and Jack Harper, scarred but soaring, had to decide. Would he lead the charge, or let his legacy carry the fight? The tarmac at Horizon Elite's Salt Lake City hub glowed under a crimson sunset. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner's sleek silhouette, a testament to the empire Jack Harper had built from Pinnacle Airways' ashes. 6 months ago, his defiance had toppled Pinnacle, exposing their falsified maintenance records and grounding their fleet. The FAA's wrath had cost the airline over 340 flights, a 46% stock crash, and the careers of CEO Lauren Grayson and operations manager Ethan Caldwell. Jack's rebellion, fueled by Emily Vaughn's damning evidence and the loyalty of 30 pilots, had saved countless passengers, but left scars, jobless crews, stranded families, and a shattered trust that haunted him. Now, as director of flight operations at Horizon, Jack had forged a training program that redefined aviation safety, his 30 Pinnacle veterans at his side. Yet, as he stood watching the Dreamliner taxi, a Tokyo charter flight awaiting him tomorrow, a restless fire burned within. The skies were his sanctuary, but a new storm was brewing, and Jack's heart trembled with the weight of what lay ahead. Horizon Elite was a beacon in the industry, its 12 new premium routes and unmatched safety record stealing Pinnacle's crown. Jack's training center, 6 cutting-edge simulators, rigorous emergency drills, and a culture of fearless transparency had become the gold standard, praised by FAA inspectors and clients alike. Emails flooded his inbox, passengers thanking him for their safe flights, pilots inspired by his stand, a grandmother whose family flew Horizon because we trust Captain Harper. Each message was a salve, but also a reminder of the passengers he'd failed at Pinnacle, those who'd boarded planes with hidden flaws, unaware of the risks. Jack wept in his office, alone with the ghosts of what might have been. His sacrifices, his marriage, his peace, his 17 years etched into every line of his weathered face. Pinnacle's collapse was a wound that refused to heal. The airline limped on, leasing planes and crews at crippling costs, their reputation in tatters. Lawsuits piled up, passengers suing for breached trust, regulators probing deeper. Jack's role as the whistleblower was an open secret, his name whispered in cockpits and boardrooms as a symbol of courage or a warning to those who dared defy the machine. Anonymous threats still came, letters accusing him of sabotage, late-night calls promising ruin. One, scrawled in jagged ink, read, "You'll never fly again, Harper." Jack burned it, his rage a quiet inferno. Pinnacle had taken everything, his job, his crew's livelihoods, his faith in the industry. But they couldn't touch his truth. The call from William Grayson had come a week ago, his voice heavy with irony. "Pinnacle's board wants you back, Jack. New chairman's begging, they're drowning." Jack had stood on Horizon's tarmac, watching Emily land the Dreamliner, and laughed bitterly. "They fired me, William, threw me out like garbage. I'm done with them." William sighed. "They're desperate, offering you CEO, full control. What do you say?" Jack's reply was steel. "I'm where I belong." Horizon was his home, his pilots, his family, and the skies his purpose. He'd negotiated to fly charters like tomorrow's Tokyo run because the cockpit was where he felt alive, title be damned. But the industry was shifting. A news alert had rocked Jack that morning. Orion Airways faces FAA probe for maintenance fraud. The parallels to Pinnacle were chilling, downgraded repairs, ignored warnings, a supervisor echoing Ethan's greed. The report named a whistleblower, a young first officer inspired by the Pinnacle rebellion, citing Jack's courage. Jack's tears fell, pride and pain colliding. His fight had sparked a movement, pilots across the industry finding their voices, but the cost was staggering. He thought of his crew, some still struggling to find work, blacklisted for their stand. He thought of his son, Ethan, who'd called, voice breaking, "Dad, you're a hero, but I'm scared for you." Jack had no words, only the weight of a fight that never ended. At Horizon's training center, Jack faced his pilots, their faces a mirror of his resolve. "Safety isn't a choice," he told them, his voice raw. "It's a promise, to passengers, to each other, to the skies. We broke Pinnacle because they broke that promise. Never let it happen here." The room roared with applause, Emily's eyes shining with pride. "Orion CSO called," he said, his tone grave. "They're begging for you to fix their program. Consulting gig, huge pay. You in?" Jack's heart raced, the call of duty clashing with the scars of his past. He wanted to save Orion's passengers, to stop another Pinnacle, but the threats, the sleepless nights, the toll on his soul loomed large. "I'll think about it," he said, his voice hollow. Marcus nodded, but the question lingered like a storm cloud. That evening, Jack stood on the observation deck, the Dreamliner gleaming below, ready for Tokyo. The sunset painted the sky in fire, a reminder of the passion that drove him. His phone buzzed. A voicemail from Pinnacle's new chairman, Charles Monroe. "Captain Harper, we need you," the voice pleaded. "CEO, name your terms, save us." Jack deleted it, tears streaming. Pinnacle had betrayed him, endangered lives, and now they dared ask for salvation. He thought of the passengers he'd failed, the crew he'd led into battle, the son who feared for him. His fight had saved thousands, but it had cost him everything, his marriage, his peace, his trust in the industry he loved. A text from Emily flashed. Orion whistleblower wants to meet. Says you're his hero. Jack's breath caught, his chest tight with grief and hope. The young pilot's courage was his legacy, a ripple spreading across the skies. But it came with a price. Another alert followed. Orion probe expands. FAA names Harper as catalyst. The industry was watching, and Jack was the spark. Admired, feared, hunted. His son's words echoed. I'm scared for you. Jack wept, the Gull's lessons from his Air Force days ringing true. Duty demanded sacrifice, but at what cost to his soul? Tomorrow he'd fly to Tokyo, the cockpit his refuge, the skies his truth. Horizon was his home, his pilots his heart, and their safety program a shield for millions. But Orion's crisis loomed, a new battle calling his name. Could he take it on, knowing the threats, the toll, the risk of breaking completely, or could he trust his legacy? Emily, Ryan, the next generation, to carry the fight. The sunset faded, stars piercing the dusk, each a passenger's life he'd saved, and a challenge yet to come. Jack wiped his tears, his gaze fixed on the Dreamliner. The skies never lied, but they demanded everything. As he turned to prepare for Tokyo, a final email from Marcus arrived, Orion's CEO flying in. They're begging for you. Jack's heart pounded, the weight of the heavens pressing down. The fight for trust was eternal, and Jack Harper, scarred, defiant, and soaring, had to choose. Answer the call and risk it all, or let the skies carry his truth forward.